I have just put in a little more than 30 hours into AVOWED, and while I did enjoy my time with the game and I definitely plan on putting more time into it, there are some major issues with the game that can't be overlooked, and they could be major deal breakers for some people. So today I wanted to give my thoughts and impressions on AVOWED to help you decide if it's worth buying or not. But first, I want to say a big thank you to Xbox for giving me a code for the premium edition of the game to let me get in and start recording and working on my review 5 days early. But now let's jump right into it. Now first, I really want to start with the story of the game, as that will be a big deal for some people, and there's a lot of discussion around the story and the voice acting. I want to do this without spoiling anything, so I'm gonna keep this short and just give you my impressions and thoughts on the story and the voice acting. In my personal opinion, I found the story of AVOWED to be very okay. It's not great, but it's also not bad. And by the time you reach the end of it, it will feel like you just finished a book or a movie that you went into with low expectations. You won't feel like it's the best storyline that you've ever played through, but it certainly won't be the worst. I have a strong feeling that everyone will have a different opinion on that, as some people will definitely find more of an attachment to the story and the characters that they meet along the way. But personally, I just didn't really care much about the main story. I liked Kai and Marius and I thought that they were good companions, but I really didn't care much about the other two, especially Yatsley. There will be a lot of dialogue in this game, like a lot of it. And there is also a lot of lore books littered around the map for you to find, collect, and read. I don't have the time to do all of that, so I grabbed the first few that I found, but after reaching the first area and seeing them literally everywhere that you look, I gave up on trying to collect them. But after completing the story, I had kind of wished that I just skipped through most of the cutscenes and the dialogue options, especially the dream sequence cutscenes that felt like they would happen every single time you left your camp, and it was extremely annoying. When it comes to the voice acting, again, I think it is just mediocre at best. None of the characters really stood out to me as having great voice acting, and there were some that were below average. But thankfully, you can just skip through the dialogue. Now, I was kind of worried about doing this at first because there was such a big emphasis on player choices and consequences. But after playing through the game, the choices really don't matter as much as you might think they do. Again, no spoilers, but the biggest consequence to my choices in the game was a result of something I wasn't even aware of. It was a hidden objective in a side quest that I missed, and this forever changed the main storyline of my game and made it impossible to access areas of the map and complete multiple side quests. So it was shocking to me to see that big decisions had little to no impact, while things that you can easily miss can completely ruin your game and make you feel like restarting. But that's all I'm gonna say about that, because by the end of this you may still want to play the game, and I don't want to spoil too much for you. Even though I personally didn't have a connection with the story, I didn't find it to be horrible, and you might even enjoy it. As a side note, I will say I enjoyed the side quests more than the main story questline. I thought a lot of the side quests that I did were actually a lot of fun. So if you're not into the main story questline, try to do as many of these side quests as you can, as they are pretty enjoyable. So now that the story and the voice acting is out of the way and open for you to decide on how you feel on it, we can move on to the other aspects of the game. And I do have a lot of big problems with AVOWED, but there were some things that I surprisingly really liked. One thing I really did enjoy was the game's combat. The combat really made up for everything that I felt was wrong with the story, so much to the point that I was itching to just get out and try new weapons and abilities and keep fighting enemies. The combat is very satisfying, and every weapon type feels good to use, especially ranged weapons like the musket and the bow, which I spent most of my playtime using. I really didn't expect to like those weapon types as much as I did, as I usually go for the more melee tanky knight builds in games like these, and that's what I built my first character around at the start of the game. But during the tutorial of the game you get your first bow, and I was instantly hooked on the ranged weapon combat. Now, as a side note, I will say that the enemy variety in this game really sucks. There are multiple factions of enemies, but they all have the same enemy types, like healers, summoners, ranged enemies, tankier enemies, and spellcasters, and there are a ton of bears. But other than that, dodging in combat feels great, using melee weapons in combat is enjoyable, and swinging your weapon and making contact with enemies feels very good, and the weapons have weight to them. The abilities are pretty basic and they are kind of what you would expect, but they are still fun to use, and there is a ton of variety when it comes to spells. So overall, they did a very good job with combat, and it's something that drove me to keep playing. The combat is a very good experience, and it really reminds me of what you would find in Dead Island and the Dying Light games, which are games that I really enjoy. I also found the exploration to be a lot of fun. It was always exciting to go out and explore as much as I could across the 5 playable areas of the game, which by the way are much bigger than I originally thought they would be, and each one of them feels unique. So it doesn't feel like you're just playing an extended part of the first area where you will see the same thing over and over. For example, you start the game on the shoreline with a big city nearby, and a lot of grassy areas with streams running inland from the ocean. And the next area is a dark forest with massive trees that you run through, and the third area is a sandy desert with ancient ruins and temples. So going into a new zone for the first time always had a fresh feeling. But there was always something new to find around every corner, from crafting resources to treasure chests and unique weapons, armor, and jewelry. And there will be a lot of enjoyable side quests that you can sink your teeth into that will also guide you throughout each area, and some of them you will just stumble upon while you're exploring. All of this made exploring every inch of the map very exciting, and the fog of war on the main map also helped me keep track of the places that I had been to make sure I was always seeing new things. But while I did really enjoy the exploration of the game, I have to mention that exploration is a mandatory part of the game. Even if you are only playing the game to enjoy the story, you literally cannot proceed further into the story without exploring. This is because of the absolutely horrible design that the developers chose for the game's progression. So how it works is that you will level up your character while you explore and complete quests and kill enemies. But your level only seems to influence the abilities that your character can use. It doesn't affect your efficiency in combat. Instead, enemies will have a tier quality symbol beside their health. This will show what tier or quality their weapons and armor are. If your weapons are below that tier, you will do 50% less damage to them, and if your armor is below that tier, you will take 50% more damage. Which wouldn't be too bad of a system, but improving the quality of your weapons and armor requires resources that you can only find while you're exploring, and then you use those resources to craft upgrades for your gear. The bad part about this is that crafting is extremely expensive in terms of the amount of resources that you will need for each level. And this is a great time to point out that the resources that you find while you're exploring, or the ones that you get off of the enemies that you kill, will never respawn. This is where my impression of the game dropped a little bit because they added so much variety to the game. Literally, there are tons of weapons and abilities and spells that you can play with, and even more unique weapons and armor. Each unique will have 2 unique perks on it that make them very desirable. And you may feel like you want to collect a lot of them so you can change your weapons and armor out based on the situation that you are in. But literally, you just can't do that. To upgrade uniques, you need to collect Adra. Adra is extremely rare, and the only way to get it is to buy it from some of the vendors that you'll find in the game, but they only sell 1 or 2 each and they never restock. Or you can find it out in the world while you're exploring, and there's usually around 10 Adra in each area of the game. Or you can deconstruct unique gear that you find to get 1 Adra, sometimes a little bit more. But upgrading a unique piece of gear one time can take up to 6 Adra. So there is simply just not enough in the game to upgrade every unique weapon. Once you realize that, you'll start to understand that you may have made some mistakes when you first started the game, and may feel that you need to restart and make smarter choices with your upgrades. And you may also realize that even though there's a lot of variety in the game, you will be pretty much locked into your build after you leave the second area. This really sucks because, like I said, the combat is fun and there's a lot of things that you will want to try, but it's just not possible to try it all. This really needs to be changed as soon as possible because it's just so counterintuitive. They make you want to try things, they make it cheap and easy to respec your talents, then they boost the difficulty and crafting cost of everything. So then you can only really have 1 or 2 reliable unique weapons and a set of unique armor, locking you into a build very early on in the game, when instead they should have opened it up and allowed you to enjoy everything that they had to offer. This wouldn't be as big of a problem if there was a new game plus option that allowed you to restart and respawn every enemy, quest, and item, then go back and recollect everything to upgrade your gear over and over. Now, a few things that I kind of disliked is that I think it's really funny that the world you play in is called the Living Lands, but it's very empty. And it gets even emptier as you explore and kill enemies as they never respawn. So after my 30+ hours, the Living Lands is actually pretty dead. The minimap also needs a big change as it's basically there just to tell you where nearby enemies, resources, and throwables are. The layouts of the playable areas can be kind of confusing, and the minimap does almost nothing to help you navigate. Adding more detail to the minimap would be a great quality of life change. I also slightly disliked the whole godlike facial feature thing. It's not that I hated it, I just didn't like that it can be turned off, and you still are not able to wear helmets. I don't know why, but not being able to wear helmets was something I disliked. I think it would have been better if you were able to grow your godlike facial features over time, by finding items in the world that you can add to your godlike features, to make it like a helmet that you can change and alter as you go, to show the power that you have gained along the way. And finally, AVOWED really needs some form of New Game Plus. I think that would be an amazing addition to the game as it would refill the world with enemies and resources, allowing you to upgrade every unique piece of gear over time, and allow you to make different choices. But those are my thoughts on the recently released AVOWED. I didn't really care too much about the main story or any of the characters, loved the side quests, thought the combat was amazing, I enjoyed exploring the map, and I plan on exploring 100% of every playable area, but there needs to be a massive change to the crafting and upgrade system, the world needs more life in it, a brand new minimap would be very helpful, and a new game plus would be a great addition. Now, personally speaking, I do think AVOWED is worth its price. I've had a lot of fun with this game, but that doesn't mean you will as well. Thankfully, AVOWED is on Xbox and PC Game Pass, so you can play it for pretty cheap. And if for some reason you want to buy the game for yourself and own it, I would suggest waiting until a sale comes up, not because it's a bad game, but just because it's cheaper to play it using Game Pass. I do think AVOWED is a great game, and I don't believe that it deserves all of the hate that it's getting. My only big issue with the game was that I personally didn't love the story and the writing, but many people did. But in terms of rating for the game, I would give AVOWED a solid 7.5 out of 10. And those are my thoughts on AVOWED, but I would love to know what you think of this game in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching.